Well, the outcome of the US election could have a profound impact on people outside the United States, not least on Ukrainians. The candidates have starkly contrasting visions of the US role in the war. Now, Donald Trump has promised to end Ukraine's war against Russia's invasion if he's elected, with a deal that, in his words, would be good for both sides. In contrast to Kamala Harris, Mr. Trump is a staunch opponent of the billions in US aid for Kyiv. Well, today, Germany's foreign minister went to Kyiv, where she was briefed on the deployment of German anti-aircraft tanks. After the US, Germany is the top contributor of military aid to Ukraine. But political turbulence here in Berlin has some in Ukraine worried that Germany might not be a reliable partner. Annalena Baerbock attempted to alleviate those fears, expressing her country's unwavering support.
I know how frightening the debate in Germany might sound to your ears. When the aggressor and you, the victims, are confused, sometimes deliberately. When some of my compatriots show doubt about German support for peace and freedom in Ukraine. So I say once again, clearly, here in Kyiv, on the eve of the election in the United States, we as the German government, as the largest country in Europe, are aware of our responsibility.
That's the German foreign minister. Let's bring in our Kyiv correspondent, Nick Connolly. Welcome, Nick. Was Annalena Baerbock able to ease Kyiv's fears about German support?
Look, Phil, she came with fresh money, 200 million euros, to help Ukraine get through the winter and protect its energy infrastructure, which Russia is constantly trying to take down. But there obviously were lots of question marks, not least the US election, but also the stability of her coalition, whether that coalition that she is part of will be in place when the new President of the United States gets to the White House, or will it have fallen apart by then? And obviously, those debates she talks about are not just among the kind of left and right parties, the Alternative for Germany and the Wagenknecht and the left party in Germany, but also within Chancellor Scholz's SPD, where there's lots of increasingly loud voices questioning whether support for Ukraine can continue as it is. And so it felt like lots of what she was saying was actually directed back to Berlin, basically telling people to get on with helping Ukraine as has been promised. She even said in response to a question that it's time for people in Berlin to get on with their jobs and to pull themselves together. That was pretty kind of strong language off the cuff there from her in response to questions. And there was a real sense that she was really hoping that by being here, reminding people back in Germany about the price that Ukraine is paying in terms of constant drone attacks. People here haven't had a decent night's sleep in months, if not years, and the threat of really prolonged blackouts if these attacks on the energy system continue, that maybe she could bang heads together and get actually people in Germany to realize that it could soon be the case that Germany will have to bear the brunt of supporting Ukraine if the United States pulls out of that help.
What would a second Trump presidency, what would that likely mean for Ukraine?
So most people see those claims from Donald Trump that he could end the war, as he says, in 24 hours as basically code for forcing Ukraine to capitulate by basically pulling the plug on support for Ukraine and then assuming that Zelensky will go cap in hand to Putin and sign some kind of treaty that gives the Russians everything that they want. For now, that seems pretty unrealistic because we have seen no indication from Putin that he wants to talk. He thinks he's winning. His troops are making progress in the east. And for now, there's no sign of a willingness to negotiate there. I think Trump is the big unknown. There is some hope. I mean, I guess Ukrainians have to hope for a positive outcome in any scenario, that Trump could actually not live up to expectations, that he might be basically the joker, and that he might, finding that Putin doesn't want to negotiate, end up giving Ukraine more weapons and basically throwing all the kind of chess pieces off the board. But that is a very big hope, and there are lots of ifs there. And I think the overwhelming hope among kind of policymakers here, even though they're not necessarily happy with everything the Biden team has done, is for a Harris victory and more of the same.
Quick word then about the medium to long term. Vladimir Zelensky recently said Germany was sceptical about Ukraine ever joining NATO. Today, Chancellor Scholz dodged a question on the topic after a meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Is Germany standing in the way of Ukraine's NATO future?
Yes. It seems to be pretty much the kind of universal conclusion, but it's not just Germany, it's also the US. We've seen very significant reluctance from Joe Biden and his team to offer that invitation to join NATO that Ukraine wants. But certainly Germany is a country that Ukraine will have to convince if it wants to get that invitation. And we've seen not just that dodging of a question from Scholz, we've also had reports in Politico today of people around Scholz talking about Finlandization, which means basically Ukraine being neutral and maybe joining the EU but not NATO, some kind of third way for Ukraine, not quite in the Russian orbit but not in the European one either. That obviously doesn't seem very attractive seen from Kyiv because Finland doesn't want to play that role anymore itself. It's joined NATO. It says it needs NATO to protect itself from Russian expansion. So there is a real worry there that, even though maybe people like Annalena Baerbock, that people are very supportive of Ukraine in certain parts of the current coalition in Germany, other parts of that coalition are a lot more sceptical, and they're trying to work out how they can convince those people in Berlin.
Nick, thank you. DW's Nick Connolly in Kyiv.